I think it's important for everybody to realize, even though it's a season, and even though we talk about like, okay, how do you want to show up as your best self and have compassion for yourself? We're also human. And so we're going to get frustrated. We're going to get angry. We're going to get down on ourselves. And I think the most important thing is like realizing, number one, we're human. Those emotions will happen. But number two, you don't have to beat yourself up for having those emotions. You don't have to beat yourself up for being human. And the more you do that, the harder you're going to make your situation.
Welcome to the Fresh Start Family Show. I'm your host, Wendy Snyder, powerful parenting educator and family life coach. And together we are going on a journey to help you expand your heart, learn new tools, and strengthen your family so you can build the family legacy of your dreams. I'm a mama too turned child and family advocate who went from being extremely stressed out back when my strong-willed little girl was a toddler to now thriving as a parent and having the honor to support thousands of families each year who choose to go from frazzled and impatient to peaceful and empowered. Each week, we will dive in with experts, thought leaders, authors, and advocates with insights to help you thrive in your parenting walk, as well as in your marriage and even in your career and faith walk too. Together, sometimes alone, sometimes with my better half and co-host Terry, we'll explore the triumphs and trials we all face as parents and share practical tools to fill our hearts, minds, and souls with inspiration. Take a deep breath and get ready to be poured into with some fresh start inspiration. Let's do this. Hello, podcast community, and welcome back. I'm so happy you're here. Today on the show, we are chatting with Natali Edmonds, who is a board-certified geropsychologist, specializing in helping family members care for a loved one with dementia. And you may be asking, how is this related to parenting? And don't you worry, it is so related. You're going to hear us talk so much about how the last season of life here on this precious planet Earth with these human souls that we have is so similar actually to the beginning of life. And how we care for our young children is so related most often to how we care for our elderly human souls. And so I know I have loved drawing, putting the dots together, so to speak, or however you say that. I have loved seeing with my own eyes, like the relationship between these two things. And when I look at, the data and how much abuse there is and the mistreatment of the elderly, especially in the world of dementia, it makes sense to me because I believe that the world is not really equipped with the education that they need yet. That's why I'm doing my work and I'm helping one family at a time change their ways with their young kids. But most of the world is not taught how to have compassion, empathy, frustration tolerance, emotional literacy, peaceful conflict resolution with their young children. Instead, they inherit and often are taught a fear-enforced model with even, concepts like instant obedience being the goal. And so that makes a difference with how you're either able or not able to treat your parents and anyone you care for in those later seasons of life, especially when there is dementia. And so it is actually Caregivers Month here. So National Caregivers Month, where there is a lot of beautiful conversations happening around how can we could support caregivers of the world. And Natali's work just is so amazing when it comes to that. And so today on the show, we are talking about caregiver stress and how to manage it. And I know many of you are in a season where you are caregiving for not only your own children, but either your parents or maybe a stepmom or a mother-in-law. And I think you're going to just be blessed and inspired by this conversation today. So to tell you just a little bit more about Natali, she talks about how after witnessing how difficult it was for families to receive the help and support they needed through the traditional healthcare system, she started an account on Instagram and an organization called Dementia Careblazers. Her company was named the 2022 Caregiving Organization of the Year. Her YouTube channel with hundreds of free videos has over 150,000 subscribers.
and over 14 million views. She trains healthcare providers worldwide on best dementia care practices and is a featured dementia expert on local and national news. And she's just doing incredible work in the world. And I think that you are really going to be fascinated by our conversation today because, again, this is one of those important subjects that we should all be talking about because eventually, right, if your parents are still on earth, you will be oftentimes called and invited in to care for them later in life. So it's going to come at some point, and having the conversation now is something that I think will serve all of us. And again, I think it's a conversation filled with hope and optimism and inspiration. So without further ado, help me welcome Natali to the show and enjoy this episode. Remember to share if it inspires you. Social, I'm at Fresh Start Wendy. Maybe text a friend or family member that you know is working with someone they love that has dementia or just in late seasons of life. But sharing is caring. And when you let someone know that this free resource is available for them to listen or watch on YouTube, then it just helps everyone have a better day. All right, enjoy this episode. Well, hey there, families, and welcome to a new episode of the Fresh Start Family Show. I'm so happy to be here today with Miss Natali Edmonds from Dementia Careblazers, who's going to be talking to us about caregiver stress and how to manage it, which, you guys, I'm telling you, there's going to be so much here about parenting that we're going to loop in. And I'm just so excited to have Natali here. Welcome to the show, Natali.
Thank you so much for having me, Wendy. I'm excited to be here.
Nice. Well, I was so pumped when I met you, Natali, because for years I have been thinking to myself, if we could help the world see how much there is in common between the end of our lives and the beginning of our lives. Like, it's just so fascinating to me, like whether someone ends up going through dementia at the later stages of their life or just naturally is in the tail end of their life, how much similarity there is and how much support and care that you need from loved ones. And I see so much difficulty in the world in that space. So much is lacking as far as support for caregivers, whether you're on the front end and you have little teeny ones who are often kind of just not cooperative or have emotions that big, strong emotions that we don't know what to do with, or you're caregiving for someone in the later parts of their life or that has dementia, and they have such similar qualities, I think. And I just look at so many of centers for the elderly, and it's just so common how much what would you say? It's like so much heartbreaking behaviors that are going on, but it's so similar to the heartbreak of the behaviors that are going on for young children. So do you see this similarity too? Of if we could empower the world with the first part and the latter part and how much they have in common, then the whole world would be better.
Yeah. I mean, it boils down to you're caring for a loved one whose well-being is in your hands. And that person is their own person. And they're going to have their own reactions to life and their own behaviors and their own experiences. And it's not always going to be great. And here you are trying to not only help the person you're caring for, whether that's an older adult with dementia or whether that's your, child, you're also trying to care for yourself and live your own life and take care of yourself and make sure you're okay. And that can be a difficult balance.
Oh, absolutely. Well, before we get into this conversation about how to manage the stress of caregiving for another human soul in any capacity, but especially in the dementia world or elderly care. And again, we're going to just have so much ties, I think, to parenting. And this is such an important conversation. But will you tell us a little bit more about your story, Natali? How did you become passionate about what you do now? And I love this, geropsychologist. Tell us more about that. So how'd you get here?
Yeah, so I am a board certified geropsychologist, which means I have a doctorate degree in clinical psychology. I went on to specialize in geriatrics and then get board certified in geropsychology, which there's only a handful in the entire country. I worked at a busy hospital, large hospital system, primarily working with the person who has dementia, doing the initial assessment, like, do they have dementia? Is this normal thinking? What's going on? Then eventually shifting to caring for the family members who are there to care for them. And as I'm sure a lot of people can relate to, the healthcare system is difficult sometimes for caregivers. There's short appointments. You have to wait a long time in between appointments. There's not a lot of time for you to get your questions answered. If you are facing a difficult situation or a challenging behavior, you don't often have the luxury to wait 6 months to find out the answer of what to do. You need help right now. And so in my practice at the hospital, I just found myself getting so frustrated that the healthcare system was not meeting the needs of the patients. So I started recording videos online, answering common questions and talking about the common challenges that family members face. And then it morphed into what is now Dementia Careblazers.
Oh, so cool. And when did you started the company? When did you start the company? How many years have you been doing this now?
So I've been doing this full time as my primary career in business for just over 2 years. It was 2 years in October that I left the hospital.
Amazing. And oh my goodness, your way of educating and helping this community who is now caretaking for someone is just so beautiful, Natali. And I love your style and your creative ways to like encourage and inspire this community. And so it's just amazing. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
And yeah. It's
no, I think
great.
It's helpful. And it's great because I'm sure like a lot of your listeners can relate to, there's a lot of scary stuff out there. There's a lot of really negative stuff out there. There's a lot of things that are, scary. And it's important to know like there are other ways to go through these journeys. And while it's never going to be always easy, there are things to make it easier. And a lot of that starts with just how we treat ourselves and how we frame things and how we look at things.
Yes, I love it. Well, let's just get right kicked off because I think listeners, whether you have someone that you're caretaking for that has dementia right now, which is going to be a lot of you. And I'm so excited for you guys to get to know Natali's work because it's just wild as you look at the seasons of life, right? Like we're in a season right now where our kids now are 16 and 13 and our parents are in their 80s now and no one has dementia. My grandmother did have Alzheimer's. So your work is very near and dear to my heart. And I lived with her. I lived with her when I was a teenager. But there are so many listeners who are getting ready to embark on like Terry and I really on the next 20 years or 10 years where we are caretaking for our parents, which like you said, there's a lot of fear happening, right? Like there's in my mind and even this week we have our 81-year-old mama who's getting total shoulder reconstruction surgery and just caretaking, like stepping into caretaking when you never have before is so intense, right? Like for someone that's in their older years of life or if you're listening and you're just like, wow, this is an interesting conversation. Like how in the world are they going to tie this into parenting young kids? Stay tuned because it's going to be such a good conversation. But let's start with number one, Natali, of how can we manage caretaker stress. And you talk to us about how it's not about always trying to make the person you're caring for happy. And this is the same in parenting. So tell me more about what this means to you.
Yeah, I think whenever we're caring for somebody we love, we always want to make them happy. That sounds like such a beautiful thing. Caring for your child or caring for your loved one with dementia, we want to make them happy. But if that's your goal, when we really think about it, it's not actually a goal we want because it can be quite dangerous and detrimental. For example, if you wanted to make your 8-year-old happy all the time, you'd probably let them stay up drinking a 2-liter of Coke and a bag of Cheetos till 2 a.m. in the morning on a school night. But like that's actually not in their best interest. That's not good for them. So you lay the boundaries and you do what's needed, even though in the moment that is not going to make them happy. And so I think really being clear and in your mind about why you're doing what you're doing is a really important thing to be aware of. Otherwise, if we're just trying to make our loved ones happy all the time, we're going to feel like we're failing, when in reality, we're actually winning and we're doing the best thing possible for the people we're caring for. I often say it's okay to be sad and it's okay to have a hard time. when you make the best decisions. And sometimes the best decision is going to be telling your child no or not today. And sometimes the best decision is going to be, allowing somebody else to come in and care for your loved one with dementia when they really only feel comfortable with you. And so our brains, like being a clinical psychologist at foundation training, our brains are, wired for the negative, and they're always going to tell us what we're doing wrong and find out what we're not doing great. And so it's really important to realize, like, wait a minute, it's impossible to keep somebody happy 100% of the time. First of all, they're their own person. And second of all, like in the dementia caregiving world, if you wanted to make your loved one happy all the time, you'd give them the car keys when they're no longer safe to drive, or you'd give them the wad of cash that they want when they've been victim to scam. It's like we have to constantly remind ourselves, wait a minute, I know this is making them upset right now, but I'm doing this for their best interest, even if they don't understand it. And I think that's the unique role as caregivers and as parents. It's like, that's what we are here for, to help guide and protect and to love, even if the other person doesn't quite see the full picture.
Families, let's be honest for a minute. Sometimes it can feel so hard to get your kids to just do what they're told. And if you are raising a strong-willed child, then it feels doubly hard sometimes. And so I want you to know that you're not alone. We have an easy solution for you. It's called our Firm and Kind Parenting Blueprint, and it is just $27. It is one of our easiest programs to finish, our most affordable program that we offer here at Fresh Start Family, where in just 1 hour, you can learn our magical 4-step process to setting firm limits and following through with consistency, but doing it from an angle of connection versus force. And so if you are like so many parents, you may be currently relying on threats, usually involving technology or candy or TV time. And I want you to know that there is simple tweaks that you can change that will help you get your kids to cooperate faster and do it in a way where you truly feel more deeply connected to them, less annoyed, less frustrated, and just more joyful and confident as a parent. So you can head to freshstartfamilyonline.com/firm and kind, or if it's easier just to pop me over a DM on Instagram, I'm at FreshStartWendy. Just send me the word blueprint in a DM and I will take good care of you. I'll send you the link so you can learn more about this easy to finish, easy to implement program called our Firm and Kind Parenting Blueprint. And we can't wait for you to get started. Enjoy.
Tell me, Natali, how you help your community embrace compassion amongst that, right? Because we know, right? Like there's such beauty in all emotions, right? Whether the person that you're taking care of is angry or sad. Like I've heard there's just so much in the dementia world that can spark sadness, or they feel hurt or scared, whatever it may be, like kids, elderly. And that it can be so frustrating, right? When you're just like, stop freaking out, right? And again, I see it as like most of the world, it does not get the education to understand how to compassionately approach and detach from a child that is super high emotion. You could even think, a lot of times we think it's irrational, like we make fun of toddlers, like, all day long. But like really approaching it with compassion and knowing that the more we're able to do that, the less like fuel we're putting on the fire. Is that the same in the dementia world? And how do you enable or empower your community to be able to do that? Because isn't there, like, I think that there's a high level of frustration and really anger, right? Like I've heard, and I don't remember talking to my dad. My dad's like a very quiet man from the South and like doesn't talk much. But I remember watching my grandma mom, and like there was times when, she would accuse my friends of stealing her underwear, and she'd be like out in her bra and underwear in the house, or she was like sure the house was on fire, right? And my dad, actually thinking back now, he was very, very compassionate with her. But I've heard that there's like, I have another friend whose mom is just starting to go into dementia, and she's like, I get so frustrated and angry, and it seems to like make things worse, right? So how do you help your community with that?
There's so many different things. One of the things that is helpful is just to understand whenever the person is like having a difficult situation or behavior, rather than thinking, oh my gosh, like they're giving me such a hard time, it's really they are having a hard time. Like those challenging emotions and situations is a sign that they are having a hard time. I promise, as much as it might, not seem this way, they're not doing this to purposely make your life miserable. They're not doing this to ruin their whole day. This is the way they're trying to make sense of the world, and just being able to understand that. And I think it's a little bit more difficult when we're talking about dementia, where there's not a visible sign outward. Their arm isn't in a cast. They don't have anything visibly wrong with them, at least in the earlier to moderate stages of the disease. They look like their normal selves in the beginning. And so when they show these behaviors, it's easy for us to just think they're doing things on purpose, when in reality, like their brain cells are dying. I imagine the same is true, when you're raising kids or having kids, they're having their own emotions. When they're having some of those outbursts, they're going through a hard time, and this is how they're making sense of the world, and this is how they're communicating. One of the things that I think can be helpful is to practice the skill of observing what's happening without absorbing it all, and also without interpreting and judging it. Sometimes when somebody is showing a behavior, it's like we want to interpret it and put a label on it right away. They're being difficult. They're being manipulative. They're being ruining everything. And the minute we put those labels on it, it's immediately going to spark a reaction in us that's not very great. And so sometimes just literally stating what they are doing without the labeling can be helpful. Like, they're talking in a loud voice. They are, waving their hands around. They are moving around really quickly through the house. Like, it sounds silly and simple, but it really helps lower our own frustration and anger to just describe what is happening versus labeling it. Because if we label it, it's like, oh, they're ruining everything. Well, of course you're going to be upset and angry if you think they're purposefully ruining everything. But if instead we were able to say, they're doing X behavior, their brain cells are dying, or this is a really complicated disease, or for a parent, this is a hard phase of life for them, or they're having a hard time grasping everything that's going on, or this is the way they're showing their emotion. Like, we get to make things mean whatever we want them to mean. And so it's a practice and a skill to, if you want to label something and interpret something, at least make it mean something that's going to fuel a more positive response. Because I teach something called the formula for change, but what we think essentially impacts how we feel, and how we feel is going to impact how we show up and what actions we take. And the actions we take from a place of frustration and anger are always going to make the situation worse and make the behavior we're witnessing worse, versus being able to show up in a compassionate way. And I do teach like a little exercise I can share if you would like to know for your parents.
Yes. Yeah.
So sometimes we can't predict all the challenging behaviors that are going to happen, but we can upfront ask ourselves, like, what kind of parent do I want to be? I ask my Careblazers, what kind of Careblazer do you want to be? We know there's going to be challenges. Like, what are the characteristics? I say, like, the top 5 characteristics you would love to have. And of course, they can't just be like kindness and peacefulness. Like, we need to really think about, like, those really hard situations. What kind of characteristics would show up in those? And so it might be characteristics of love for sure, compassion for sure, but maybe determination, maybe confidence, maybe those kinds of characteristics. And so if you can come up with your top 5 characteristics that are really meaningful for you, that you think would serve you in hard times, then you get to ask yourself, when the hard situation you are faced with is right in front of you, you can say, what would determination look like right now in this moment? Or how would compassion show up in this moment? What would the compassionate caregiver do? What would the compassionate parent say right now? Or the confident parent say right now? And you can just start to, relate to this version of yourself that you already are. It's just that in the moment we forget it when the stress takes over.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Yeah, I've heard you share before, instead of focusing on happy, focus on the meaning. And what you're talking about is such a great description of that, right? Like, this is a season you will look back on, and you can find such meaning in how you were able to develop into the person that you want to be through the challenge, right? Like, whether that's you all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I did not think parenting was going to be like this. Like, so many of our students get blessed with strong-willed kids when they did not expect that. And they just thought they were going to be able to, like, do the standard stuff, put a kid in timeout, like punish them, or make them feel bad and then they wouldn't misbehave tomorrow. Not with strong-willed kids. No, like so many parents get into a position where they're like, how did I get here? This is crazy. And it is often a season, right? And those really hard seasons that sometimes can be 5 or 10 years, right? But like to focus on the meaning part of like who you want to be and look back on in your life legacy and realize like, wow, I took care of my loved one with compassion, with confidence, with determination, with unconditional love, with grit. I would imagine so many of your community like is open to learning, right? Like it's just so beautiful. We forgot to share in your story, Natali, or hear about your story, but you were a caretaker or are a caretaker? Is it for your dad now or was or?
So my mom passed away last June. I helped care for her. And then my dad currently is going through his own health conditions. His cognitive issues are more related to chronic alcohol use and drug use. But yeah, so currently in the midst of caring for him as well.
Wow. So yeah, you were a caretaker to both of your parents. Wow.
Yes.
And so that is a big season. So much of what you teach is like you are and were and still are applying it on a day-to-day basis. So
yeah, and I think it's important for everybody to realize like, even though it's a season and even though we talk about like, okay, how do you want to show up as your best self and, have compassion for yourself, we're also human. And so we're going to get frustrated. We're going to get angry. We're going to get down on ourselves. And I think the most important thing is like realizing, number one, we're human. Those emotions will happen. But number two, you don't have to beat yourself up for having those emotions. You don't have to beat yourself up for being human. And the more you do that, the harder you're going to make your situation. And I love the metaphor of seasons. It's like we're approaching winter. And in winter, things die. Things aren't blooming. Things are cold. And so I don't make it mean that something's wrong, that right now my life is compiled with doctor's appointments and making sure they're taking medicine and, doing all of those things. It's like, this is winter right now. And in winter, this is what we do. And then I know there's a spring coming. I know there's a summer coming. Maybe it's a longer winter than I would like, but I know those things are on the horizon. And so I think when we try to resist reality or we have this image of perfection that we're always supposed to be like totally perfect all the time, we just make things so much harder on ourselves.
Yes, it's so true. And that kind of ties in to your second point of like getting rid of the guilt, right? So I imagine like, and I know again, there's so many similarities. And with our students, there are so many times where you do just lose it. Like I imagine that that's just such a norm when you're caretaking for someone with dementia that you might just yell at them or tell them to stop being so freaking difficult or what the hell is wrong with you? Or like, this is like, you're acting like an idiot. I don't know, but that has to happen, right? So like, or feeling guilty about like wishing your kid was different or some days where, we have, again, parents blessed with these beautiful, strong-willed kids that some days you just don't like your child and you just don't even want to be with them. But like these are, again, we're talking about humanity. This makes us human beings. We're shooting for progress and growth and over perfection. So talk to us about getting rid of guilt when you're caring for another human soul.
Yeah, I think a lot of what we feel guilty over too are totally natural human emotions. I shared something on my Instagram recently. It was a statistic, and it's 73% of dementia caregivers report feeling relief when their loved one with dementia dies and passes away. And so many people were like, oh my gosh, thank you for saying this. Thank you for sharing how we feel. I felt like such a horrible human being. I'm like, 73% of you feel this way. Like the thing that we are ashamed of is actually a natural human emotion in the dementia caregiving world. And I imagine there are similar statistics out there for parents, sometimes not liking their kids or sometimes wishing, their kids would grow up quicker. And like those. So number one, it's realizing this is normal. And then I think what's really a helpful practice is to imagine somebody you super duper love and care about, whether it is your child now or your child 10 years from now or a best friend or a spouse. So long as it's somebody you truly, truly care about, imagine that they came to you and shared with you exactly what you are struggling with. is shared with you, and whatever it is that you're struggling with, they said the same thing. Oh my gosh, I feel so guilty. I want to go out and be with a friend, but that means I have to leave my kid back with the babysitter they don't like, or I have to leave my kid with, I have to leave my loved one with dementia with the caretaker they don't like. And I feel so guilty. Like, imagine somebody you cared about coming to you with this situation. What would you say to them? I guarantee you wouldn't tell them you are horrible. You should feel guilty. I can't even believe you would consider going out. You would never, ever say those things. The things you would tell that person you care about, that's exactly the type of stuff that we need to tell ourselves. And that is something we can do. And that is a skill we can build. I think that if somebody in our lives talked to us the way we talk to ourselves in our minds when it comes to how we show up in caregiving, we wouldn't keep that person in our life very long. Yet we do this internally in our minds every single day for hours a day. And it's important to catch yourself doing that.
I love that. Makes me think about something for a minute, because we're starting to talk about like our minds and how much we beat ourselves up. And, it's like in our world, caring for these mini human beings, there's so much like healing that comes out of the challenge and the struggle. So you're put in this fire, so to speak, and you're like, oh my gosh, this feels tough. There's things that come out that you just never realized that were part of you, or insecurities, or like even memories of stuff, until you have these children and are so challenged. So does the same thing happen for a lot of people when they are tasked with this and they're so triggered? I would imagine it's so triggering all the time, whether it's fear or frustration or anger or confusion, not knowing how to help this person, or worrying, like all the stuff. Do you see like a lot of, and is that something you guys do, is a lot of healing work? Because that's what ends up making everything so much easier to actually do, right? So if we want to be compassionate, if we want to follow through with a strategy or a tool, there's like, you got to heal first. So do you see that a lot in your community?
For sure. And I think healing is an ongoing process. Like, it's constantly being done and happening. And it happens a lot in our community because sometimes people are caring for spouses where maybe they didn't have the greatest relationship. Maybe, there wasn't the greatest marriage. Sometimes people are caring for parents where the parent was never a great parent to them. And now they find themselves sacrificing their own energy, their own time, their own money to care for somebody. And so it's really hard. It's a little bit like, well, why am I doing this? Like, I know they would never do this for me. And so sometimes it can be really hard because you'll hear stories, and a lot of what's shared on news is like, oh, I'm caring for my loved one because I know that's what they would do for me, or because we said till death do us part and I want to honor our marriage vows. But not all relationships are that beautiful and that loving and have that great history. In fact, I find at least half of them are the complete opposite, yet people are still caring for them. And so there's a lot of healing that has to happen, that happens in the process of caring. I also think that's why it's really important to know your reason for doing what you're doing. Like, why are you showing up to be the best caregiver? Why are you standing by your loved one's side? Why are you trying to be this great parent for your kid when you never had a great parent yourself? Like, those are important questions to answer. So we're not just doing it because we think we're supposed to, or because society says we're supposed to, because then we start to breed resentment. We start to feel resentful of the person we're caring for, which is going to make things harder. So that's definitely part of the deep work.
Parents, have you grabbed my free resource called Setting Strong Limits Cheat Sheet, where I will teach you the exact 4 steps I teach inside our signature Firm and Kind Parenting Blueprint program, but just kind of the bird's eye view, so to speak, so you can peek into this process and learn more about why it works so well to influence kids, especially strong-willed ones. This free Setting Limits Cheat Sheet comes with a beautiful printable you can hang on your fridge or keep inside your car to help you get through all the drama and highs and lows that come with normal parenthood. And you can get a copy by either shooting me a DM on Instagram. I'm at Fresh Start Wendy with the word limits, or you can head to freshstartfamilyonline.com/limits now. And if it's easier and you're watching this on YouTube, you can click below in the pinned comment or the show description to get easy access to this free resource. Enjoy.
Yes. And I can imagine there's so much forgiveness that comes up and understanding like, those triggered knee-jerk reactions, or we call them protection or closed down behaviors in our work, but like looking at it afterwards and like what was underneath of that caused you to yell at them, that then I'm sure they come to you and they're like, Natali, like help me tomorrow, be more patient because today I just couldn't do it. Like what is getting in my way of being able to detach or be compassionate, right?
Yeah. And that's why I love your Instagram handle, right? Fresh Start Wendy. It's like everything can be a fresh start. You can just start over again. I tell my Careblazers, you could just choose again. Like choose again another thought to believe, choose again another behavior to do, choose again in another moment. It's okay. Like life is always 50-50. There's always hard, there's always easy, there's always bad, there's always good, whatever it is. And there's nothing you can do. There's no amount of medication, meditation, exercise, or gratitude you could ever do to wipe away the hardships of life. And so one of the practices is, okay, how do we, if we know they're going to happen, how do we want to think about them when they happen? How do we want to, talk to ourselves when they happen? What do we want to make it mean when life goes off the rails? Like those are decisions we can make right now.
Yes. And okay, talk to us a little bit about that, because I love hearing every psychologist, life coach has a different way of like mentoring the change of thoughts, right? So
yes.
Tell us the Natali way. So like we get that, I think we always say that there's awareness, there's self-awareness, and there's self-acceptance, and both have to be really big in order to like actually change your behavior tomorrow, right? So many people become aware fast. They're like, oh, I'm yelling at my kids every day, or I'm raising my voice at my mother-in-law that I'm caretaking for. Like there's so much awareness. And then you start to, I think it's easier to become aware of your thoughts of like, oh, I'm thinking like earlier when you said, just observe, right? Like they're walking loudly through the house versus like they're being a pain in the ass right now, or they're making the day difficult. But like in order to do that, it's easier said than done.
Yeah.
So what it like to be able to capture the thoughts though, and then change them? Like what is your method to help your community do that? Because changing the thought is so powerful, but it's easier said than done. And oftentimes like in my work, parenting now, I'm 13 years deep, and I feel like that's my fluency land. I can help people do it all day long. I can do it, but I'm actually like in a financial healing program right now. And I'm like, oh, I feel like I'm a kindergartner again. Like I get these thoughts and I'm like, if I change it, I kind of feel like it's bullshit. So I'm like, how do you change it? Believe it.
Yes.
Like lean into it and then act from that thought. How do you coach your community on that?
There's a lot. I mean, a lot of what I do, at least half of what I do is all about mind management and managing your thoughts. If you no behavior tip or trick is ever going to last for very long, and the disease is always changing. So rather than learning just one tip or trick, we have to learn like our own mind management before we can apply any of those things. So the very first step to being able to change a thought is to be aware that you even had one. And a lot of people aren't even aware these thoughts are happening. We call them automatic thoughts in psychology. Life happens, a situation happens. Maybe your kid just called you a mean name, or your loved one with dementia just called you a mean name. And then we have a feeling. And most people think it's whatever just happened that the situation caused our feeling. And that's not true. There's no situation that causes your feeling. It is always that you have a thought about the situation, because if you lined up 10 people in the same situation, they would all feel differently. How do you explain that? You explain that because everybody had a different thought. And so number one, you just have to become aware that you're having a thought. And the best way to do this is just to pay attention to whenever you have a shift in your mood. If all of a sudden you notice you're super happy, or all of a sudden you notice you're super scared or anxious or sad or mad, that's a cue to say, wait, what just went through my mind? And this is the hardest part in the beginning for people who don't realize like we're having thoughts all day long, every day. And that is what is causing our feelings. And our goal is not to stop our thoughts. We cannot do that. We can't even control all of our thoughts. Like there are some thoughts I have on a daily basis that I'm like, there it goes again. There, it's kind of like observing that one's still popping up. Okay. Like I see you. Hello. Like I don't have to like make it mean a big thing. I don't have to make it mean like, I have to fix it until it goes away. It's just that I don't have to give it the power, and I get to choose another thought instead. In fact, I have an exercise with my Careblazers that I take them through. It's called the thought buffet. And so once they start to learn to like make the connection between how they're thinking and how they're feeling, I give them this exercise at the thought buffet. And I say, imagine like you go to a buffet restaurant And there are all these food options on the buffet. And like, there are definitely foods you probably don't like. Are there certain foods you don't like, Wendy?
Yes, there are.
Yeah. Like for me, I don't like ham or jello, like, or eggs. And so if I were to go to a buffet and I saw eggs and ham and jello, I'm not going to call over the manager and say, what in the world is this doing on the buffet? Take it off. I don't like it. I don't want it. Meanwhile, my favorite French fries are sitting right next to it. Right? No, I just grab the French fries and I leave the eggs. Like that's what I do when I go to a buffet. So we can do the same thing with our thoughts, but we don't. What we end up doing is we have this negative thought, or we have this thought we don't like that doesn't serve us. And we get so frustrated that it popped up again. And I can't believe I'm still thinking this. This is still making me feel upset. And it's almost like we're trying to call the manager over to take something off of the thought buffet, when in reality, we could just go pick up something else off the buffet. And so it's a never ending buffet. There's going to be all kinds of plates. You're going to find that you are going to pick up thoughts and you're going to notice thoughts you don't like. And that is okay. As soon as you notice it, you can go get a clean plate. Now, sometimes you're not going to notice it until after you ate it and your stomach hurts. You're like, oh man, I did it. I ate, I can't believe I stayed in it that long. And that's okay. But the more you increase your awareness, next time you'll catch yourself when maybe you've only had one swallow. And then the next time you'll catch yourself when you're putting it on the plate. And then the next time you realize I'm actually going to pass up on those eggs. And I'm going to go over here to the fruit that I really like and put that. And so it's kind of a nice metaphor of thoughts are never going to stop and your negative thoughts are never going to stop. We have the negativity bias. It's okay. What are you paying more attention to? What are you purposefully feeding your mind? And what are you purposefully trying to believe and think when you notice the negative thought? And like you said, with the whole financial course, like sometimes you try to have a new thought and it's like, this feels like phony baloney. You can't just think a fake thought that unless it has to resonate with you and it has to make you feel better. And so what I would say, like taking the financial example, is if you were trying to say like, maybe you have a thought like, I'm horrible with money. And you're trying to have a thought like, I'm great at money. And you say that and immediately your body will tell you like, yeah, I don't believe that at all. I'm not great at money at all.
Yeah.
Well, you can do something called a ladder thought. And so instead of going straight to like the belief that I'm great at money, you might say like, one day it's possible I might be great at money. It's possible that some people are great at money. There was one time on one day that I actually was okay with money. And then you bridge yourself up like, on yesterday, I was good with money. I'm becoming good at money. I am good with money. And so you bridge yourself up like that. Like sometimes we try to force ourselves to jump so quick to a belief. It's never going to work. You have to actually believe it. And it's okay to work yourself up. And I always say, if there's somebody in the world who is proof that that's possible, then it's proof. Why not for you? And so you can say, well, it's possible for some people. You might even say it's possible for some people to be good with money. And you can start there.
Yes. Oh my goodness. And that's why it's like there's so many different takes on how to do this. And it's so important that you have a mentor in your space of difficulty to give you these ideas, right? Like, so I feel like sometimes it's not so easy to change the thought, right? Like to think like, what would be a thought that would make my nervous system feel more settled or feel easier on me or help my body feel more like capable, right? But when you have mentors, like I've seen you serve up a thought change that's so significant in the idea of like wishing it was easier instead to focus on like the thought of how am I going to create this to be the easiest that I can, or how can I create a more supportive, or how can I create ease here? And then you start like fixating on that instead of, and so you're allowing, like you're passing up on the buffet option to like, oh, I wish this was easier, which parents of strong-willed kids can relate to all day long, because there's just so many times where you think that you're like, why do you have to be so difficult? Why can't you just say yes like your 3 siblings, right? And those strong-willed kids are just like, no, they're never going to do it. They're not going to just be easy yesers. But if you fixate on that thought, you're literally going to drive yourself insane. But instead, like kind of choosing to engage with the thought of like, how am I going to create an environment here that has more ease or has more cooperation, or where I'm setting the tone? I can imagine like how much like energy setting of a tone there is. I would imagine, tell me, Natali, if this is accurate, but like, is there like mirror neurons that fire when you're taking care of dementia loved ones, like with younger kids, where the energy you bring is often matched. Does that happen?
Oh, absolutely. Your nonverbals and how you show up is extremely important, especially because people with dementia oftentimes start to lose their ability to fully understand what you're saying. So you can be saying something totally lovely. You can be saying, you look great today. That hat looks beautiful on you. But if you're stressed out and you're tensed, they're going to pick up more on that than your beautiful words. So we have to be very careful about how we're showing up. The facial expressions, our nonverbals, our energy absolutely play a role in caregiving.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes that's hard because you're in a hard situation. And, I am never one to say like you have to feel good all the time. I think that's impossible. I think it's unrealistic and it actually makes us feel worse. And this is why it's important when you say like, I wish it was just easier. Wishing it was easier actually makes your life harder because you have to, that's why it's important to notice the connection between your thoughts and your feelings. And so just sometimes realizing like, this is stating the obvious, like this is hard. And that's okay. Like, this is just hard. And in those really, like, sometimes to try to prevent myself from breaking down, if you're in the middle of a care task, because they pick up on your emotions so much, like in the moment, I'll sometimes say like, care now, cry later. Like in my mind, I'm like, get through the care now, I can cry later. And so I do still give myself that permission, whether it's, in the shower, in the bathroom, 5 minutes later. But we have to be realistic too. Like we can't just stop and process our emotions every time, especially when you have somebody in front of you who really needs your help, like a child in need or a loved one with dementia. But we can still give ourselves that time later.
Yeah. So beautiful. Okay. Talk to us about point number 3 when it comes to managing caregiver stress, the importance of being your own best friend.
Yeah. This really gets kind of like what I was talking to later, like what kind of best friend would you be to somebody going through your challenge? What would you be saying to them? How would you be showing up to them? And then practice saying that to yourself. I don't think we do a very good job at supporting our own selves. We do a fantastic job, even though it doesn't feel like it all the time, supporting our children we're trying to raise, supporting our loved one with dementia, being for them, caring for them, caring for our loved ones in our lives. Yet we hardly put any of that amount of effort into ourselves. And that's something we can do. And when you catch yourself beating yourself up, it's literally like, okay, what else could I tell myself right now? What would I tell somebody I cared right now? Like, how can I be my best friend in this moment? And you just start there.
That's beautiful. Yeah, again, I tie so much of the struggle most of us, it sure feels like the majority of people face in their 3rd, 4th, 5th decade of life with the amount of like self-inflicted shame. I really see that we have an opportunity to change that with the way we are raising our children, which then creates an entirely different experience for human beings. So then when they care for their elderly parents, and especially if they have dementia, then it's just a whole different thing, right? But that self-compassion piece just really starts to become so blatantly clear in your 3rd, 4th decade of life, because it's like you just so fast beat yourself up, right? And so like for me, like the shame on you was like a big one used in our home growing up, and is like, it's like that's old school, but it's essentially, I've been trying to break that one for like years, and I do it in a different way. But mine is more like, what were you thinking? Like, you did it wrong. You're going to be found out, like that kind of stuff. So I recently had a mentor share how maybe the idea of making it a game could be fun, of like, okay, I see I'm beating myself up, but like, what would it look like? Like, let's just see if I can do, like, what else could I tell myself right now that's a little bit more self-compassionate, of like, so that clicked with me. I was like, oh, I can make this a little bit of a game.
Yeah. Sometimes I tell my Careblazers, because, we all have that voice, and those some of the thoughts we tell ourselves are literally just habits now. We have good neural pathways in our brain where it's just easier to think. And so sometimes I imagine like we're driving a car, And like, you're driving the car, you're dictating where it's going, but it's in the back seat. Like, you should have turned left back there. Oh, really? That's the speed limit you're going to go. And so it's a little bit like, okay, come on this road trip. I hear you. Yep. Okay. Oh, but I'm still driving. I'm still in control. And like, sometimes they'll joke and they'll be like, I'm sticking it in the trunk right now. Like, I don't want to hear from it. But if we have this expectation sometimes, like, it should be gone right now, I shouldn't be struggling with this still, can't believe this is still hanging out, it actually makes it stronger and it helps it stick around and have more power over your life.
Yeah.
Versus like, okay, I see you, let's go. You can hop in the car. You're not going to drive this car, but you're there and that's okay. We don't have to make it mean like we're still failing or we're doing something wrong, that it's still there. A lot of this is because probably for 20, 30, 40 years even, you've been thinking these things. And so it's going to take some time for it to lose its control and hold and power. And, for some of us, we haven't even been practicing the new beliefs for a good month. We haven't even been really like making those our more habit thoughts. So we just have to be kinder to ourselves.
Yeah. And do you see in your community where that's like a great concept? Like, let's be more self-compassionate. Let's be kinder. It's like lovely. But like, no, it works. Like, the reason why we want to do that is, yes, that's because of what we deserve as human beings. We don't need to be so freaking hard on ourselves. But at the same time, it works to change our behavior tomorrow, right? So like, if we want to calmly walk away when we are so frustrated that we're about to raise our voice or say something that we're going to regret, or it's like, I know in the caretaker world, like, especially in centers, that there is like physical aggression that comes out. And I don't know if you see this in your community, but I imagine the shame that comes along with that, just like it is with younger kids, right? Like, I've written articles before about when I grab my little boy's wrist or upper arm too hard. Like, these are human things that we do, right? But like, when you are stuck beating yourself up, your behavior won't change tomorrow. But if you can come beside yourself and say, no wonder you were angry, you made a mistake, it doesn't make you bad. It just means that there's something we got to get under or heal from. You're doing a great job. We're in this together, whatever it may be. Then you're more likely to not grab the wrist too tight tomorrow or make an aggressive raising of your voice, right? Like, do you see that in your community too, that the people who are able to really start being kinder to themselves and being their best friend then come back to you the next day and they're like, I was patient today, or I followed through on what you taught me, Natali. Do you see that?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. And the beating yourself up part, that's entirely optional. But the learning part, that's what we want to grab onto. Okay, I did this. I don't really want to do that next time. I see what I did. Like, maybe I can try this different. Like, sometimes people think, well, if you don't beat yourself up, then, you're not going to improve. Actually, that's not true at all. Like, you can still improve and you can still learn without beating yourself up. I always say, if beating yourself up was somehow going to give your child a better life or give your loved one a better life, I might advocate for it, actually, but it doesn't. It doesn't give them a better life. It actually hurts them because you're not showing up as your best self. So, and that's where I think it's really important to surround yourself with other people who have similar values or goals as you do, like with other parents, with strong-willed kids. Surround yourself with them so that number one, you're not alone. Number two, the thing you're so embarrassed to admit that you're ashamed of, actually everybody else has been going through. That's what people find in our support groups. It's like, they're talking about, their frustration about dealing with their loved ones, feces or something like that. And they're so embarrassed about how they responded or how they feel. And then one brave soul mentions it and everybody's like, oh my gosh, yes. And, and it's like, wait a minute, like, this is normal stuff. Like, we don't have to keep hiding from this.
No, the hiding and the shame is what keeps us stuck. It's what keeps us stuck. So, oh my gosh. Well, gosh, Natali, I just love your work so much. Are you out in the world yet, like certifying people or teaching professionals? Because I know you're really like forming communities and you're working directly, right? But are you doing any type of like certification work yet?
So we have a certification program people can apply for. But right now we do consultation with care facilities, consultations with healthcare providers, things like that. Our main the biggest group we have right now are actual family members caring for loved ones with dementia, trying to get through it without running themselves in the ground. Ultimately, what we'd like to do is certify facilities to show that this is actually a dementia-friendly facility with staff members who are trained in dementia care. The majority of healthcare professionals have zero to little training in dementia care. The majority of memory care facilities, where it's over $100,000 a year for your loved one to go stay in a shared room, the majority of those individuals have zero to little dementia care training, if any, maybe an hour video. And so our company is here to change the average of everything in the dementia care world, because the numbers are quite frightening and scary. And so we're doing that one bit at a time.
Yes, Natali, that makes me so happy to hear that, because again, it's very similar in the parenting world. Like, it just blows my mind that this is like the most important thing in the world, is caring for another human soul. And there is there's really no real support. Like, there's no funding, there's no education. Like, you just get given this human soul and you're expected to know what to do. And then there's so much messiness in that. And if there was just more support there, and then at the end of life too, with everything you teach, with everything I teach, if that were to come together at both ends, then, oh my gosh, it would just be so much better. Because I'm not even in your world, and I see what's happening in these care centers and with people who are caring for it. And it's just heartbreaking, because they all need more support and what you are teaching. So I'm so happy to hear that you've got the certification going, that you have this vision to get all of these centers trained and qualified in what you teach, because this is like human dignity work. This is every single human being on the planet, no matter if they're a crazy wild 3-year-old or a crazy wild 97-year-old that has dementia. They deserve dignity and compassion and respect, and so does their caregiver. So I just love
Thank you for those kind words. Yes, I always say, like, you are deserving of the same amount of love and care that you give so freely to your loved one. So same for your audience as well, I'm sure.
Yes. Well, Natali, tell everyone where they can come find you and support your work and get into your programs and all the things.
You can go to our website. It's www.careblazers.com, or just type Careblazers into Google. We'll pop up.
Oh, I love it. And Instagram, you are at Dementia Careblazers, right?
Yep.
And I will say that one of my favorite videos you've ever done, I mentioned it in this interview, but it was about the idea of, like, if you, like, instead of just wishing it was different, instead focus on creation. And that, I believe, you have pinned up at the top of your Instagram page. And I believe you have a free resource that if they comment a word, that they can get that. That's like what I'm finding is so easy for people these days. Just find you on Instagram, find that one reel that is so easy to connect with, and then comment to get that right into their hands. Is that right?
Absolutely. You go to Instagram, Dementia Careblazers, link in bio, or click on that very first pinned post. There's a free survival guide you can grab. A lot of our resources are 100% free.
Perfect. And you have a beautiful YouTube channel too, right, Natali?
YouTube's our primary, yes. If you type Careblazers, YouTube will pop up. That's where we're mostly at for more in-depth training and support.
Yeah. So listeners, if you have someone who you know is caring for someone with dementia, please share this episode with them. That would just be so wonderful. So Natali, thank you so much again for doing your work. You are incredible. You are a light spreader. Your work matters, and we are so grateful for you. Thanks so much for spending time with us today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, that's a wrap. You made it to the end of a value-packed Fresh Start Family Show episode. I hope you are feeling empowered and motivated and inspired. Now is a great time to head to freshstartfamilyonline.com/firm and kind to grab the Firm and Kind Parenting Blueprint, our $27 mini course that will teach you our easy to implement yet magical in terms of results 4-step process to setting strong limits and sticking to them with consistency. Enjoy, and I'll see you in the next episode. Hooray! You made it to the end of a Fresh Start Family Show episode. Thank you so much for being here. If you have a quick second, make sure you hit subscribe to our show so you can be updated when our new episodes drop. I will see you back soon for the next episode.